Right, hello.
Right, hello.
We should be live. Hello, my name's Waldowski, and let's get into another part of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the Discovery Tour. I think you got about 9 tours left. We'll see how long it takes. Discovery Tour. This might be our last stream of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. We'll see. Pericles had the state pay citizens to participate in civic life. The arrangement was unique to Greece. Had the state pay citizens. Oh, sorry. I read that completely wrong. That's a bad start. Usually I read better than that, I should think. I don't know why I just skim read it. Right, we're on Corinthia, and I guess this is the next one immediately, right? Station 3. Explore Corinth, and discover the relationship between the gods and romance.
Hello, my friend. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Corinth's Temple of Aphrodite. It really is a lovely sight, isn't it? The temple, that is, not the ladies. Although they are also lovely. Lovely and lively and, I'm sorry, what were we talking about? In Greece, many love stories were told about the gods. How romantic. Sometimes they were heartwarming and happy, but they often ended in tears, tragedy, and a whole brood of illegitimate children. I'm looking at you, Zeus! Anyway, this tour will introduce you to some of these divine love stories, which may give you perspective on how the Greeks approached love in their own lives. Enjoy your visit, my friend. I'll come see you again when you finish the tour.
Right, gods and love.
Much like Athens, Corinth had its own acropolis, called the Acrocorns. The natural promontory provided an excellent view of the surrounding territory. It was also the home of several sanctuaries, allegedly constructed in the 6th century BCE. The Acrocorns' most famous attraction was the Temple of Aphrodite. Pausanias describes it as having statues of Aphrodite, her son Eros, and the sun god Helios. According to Strabo, the temple's most distinguishing feature was its servants, who acted as sacred prostitutes. However, Strabo is the only source for this information, and it is still hotly debated to this day.
On the eve of the Battle of Salamis, the situation for the Greeks felt hopeless. After their loss at Thermopylae, the Persian king Xerxes' advance seemed unstoppable. Seeking solace in religion, the women of Corinth gathered at the temple of Aphrodite. According to the authors Pindar, Plutarch, and Athenaeus, the women prayed to the goddess, begging her for anything to stop the Persian invasion. It seems their prayers were answered, and the Battle of Salamis ended with a glorious victory for the Greeks. General view.
Love played a large role in countless mythological stories. Zeus himself was not immune to the feeling, and fell for both mortals and other deities. Some myths centered on forbidden feelings that led to tragedy, such as Phaedra's love for her stepson Hippolytus. While marriage was prominent in mythology, it was usually presented as problematic. For example, Aphrodite frequently cheated on her husband Hephaestus, and Medea's resentment against her ex-husband Jason eventually drove her mad enough to murder her children. These less-than-ideal depictions reflected the Greeks' idea of marriage, which they viewed as a civic duty instead of a romantic union.
The Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, which dates back to the 7th or 6th century BCE, tells the story of the goddess succumbing to the charms of a mortal man named Anchises. But upon Aphrodite herself, Zeus cast sweet desire to be joined in love with a mortal man, to the end that very soon not even she should be innocent of a mortal's love, lest laughter-loving Aphrodite should one day softly smile and say mockingly among all the gods that she had joined the gods in love with mortal women who bear sons of death to the deathless gods, and had mated the goddesses with mortal men, and so he put in her heart sweet desire for Anchises, who at that time among the steep hills of many fountained Ida was tending cattle, and in shape was like the immortal gods. Therefore, when laughter-loving Aphrodite saw him, she loved him, and terribly desire seized her in her heart.
I'm busy right now, my friend. Come talk to me later.
The goddess Aphrodite was one of the mightiest Olympians, and was typically associated with love, beauty, and sex. She was worshipped all across the ancient Mediterranean by men and women, both young and old. Her origins differ depending on the version of the story. The poet Hesiod says that she was born from the severed genitals of Uranus, while Homer's version of the myth names her as the daughter of Zeus and Dione. Aphrodite appeared regularly in mythological stories and had many mortal lovers. Her favorite was Adonis, a beautiful boy who died tragically in a hunting accident. Aphrodite was devastated by his death, so she created a cult called the Adonia to commemorate him.
Marble statue of Aphrodite inspired by Eros was the god of sexual love. According to ancient poets like Alcman, Ibycos, and Sappho, he was young and beautiful, but also cunning, unpredictable, and cruel. The tragedian Euripides later introduced the concept that Eros wielded a bow and arrows that induced feelings of love in whoever they struck. Cupid. Eros was also a god of fertility and was allegedly celebrated in places like Thespiae, Athens, and Elis. On vases and in other art, he was usually depicted as winged and boyish, and was often represented alongside Aphrodite. He was also associated with women, domestic scenes, and weddings. Depending on the myth, he has had various different mothers, including Eileithyia, Peneia, Iris, Aphrodite, and Gaia. Hesiod, meanwhile, believed Eros was a primeval god who emanated from chaos.
My friend, good to see you again. I bet you were surprised by some of the stories you heard. For a bunch of immortal beings, the gods certainly were saucy, eh? Tell me if there's anything else I can do for you. Is that so, my friend? Then let's get started. Which poet said that Aphrodite was the daughter of Zeus and Dione? Yes, it was Homer who said Aphrodite was a child of Zeus. On to the next question. Medea was married to which legendary hero?
I don't know, Pelops?
Depending on the story, Heracles married many women, but none of them were Medea. Try another answer. Odysseus was married to Penelope. Try again. Yes, Medea was married to Iason, But after he left her for someone else, she resented him so much, she murdered their children. But let's not talk about such depressing things. Instead, you can answer this last question. What was the name of Corinth's Acropolis? Correct! The Acro-Corinth has been home to many sanctuaries, as well as the famous Temple of Aphrodite. You passed the test! Congratulations, my intelligent friend! I'd be happy to. Right this way.
I'm going to go back because there was a landscape picture that I wanted. We'll start a quest. What was it? The Acro... Oh shit, where have we come from? Corinthia. It was this one, wasn't it? Visit the silver mines that help make Athens a fortune and discover ancient mining practices.
Welcome to the silver mines of Lavrion. The mines make me nervous. All those fumes can't be safe to inhale day in and day out. The Lavrion silver mines were discovered between Thorikos and Cape Sunion, near Athens. They were rich in the mineral galena, and provided Athens with much of the silver necessary to mint its currency. Because of this, the mines were invaluable to the city, and the resources they provided helped turn Athens into one of the most powerful states in Greece. We will meet again after you've seen what the mines have to offer. Farewell for now, wanderer.
Just gonna go back quick. Oh shit, and I should have looked at where we were now. Oh. Problems already. Oh, it was the silver mines, wasn't it?
Hello, my friend! It is my pleasure to introduce you to Corinth's Temple of Aphrodite. It really is a lovely sight, isn't it? The temple, that is, not the ladies. Although the... In Greece, many love stories were told about the gods. How romantic. Sometimes they were heartwarming and happy, but they often ended in tears, tragedy, and a whole brood of illegitimate children. I'm looking at you, Zeus! Anyway, this tour will introduce you to some of these divine love stories, which may give you... Enjoy your visit!
So, how's everybody's day going? Going good? Hope it's going good. Everyone alive, right? That's the main thing. You have quit the tour. Visit the silver mines that help make Athens its fortune and discover ancient mining practices.
Welcome to the
We already said this stuff, didn't we?
The Lavrion silver mines were discovered between Thorikos and Cape Sunion, near Athens. They were rich in the mineral galena and provided Athens with much of the silver necessary to mint its currency. Because of this, the mines were invaluable to the city, and the resources they provided helped turn Athens into one of the most powerful states in Greece. We will meet again after you've seen what the mines have to offer. Farewell for now, wanderer.
Silver mines were extremely rare in ancient Greece, which only increased their importance. Athens started exploiting the Lavrian silver mines at the end of the 6th century BCE and used its metal to produce its currency. Production at the mines exploded around 485 BCE when an especially rich vein was discovered. The mine's abundant silver made Athens one of the wealthiest cities in Greece. They also provided the resources necessary to build a fleet large enough to defeat the Persians at the Battle of Salamis. In short, the Lavrian mines played an integral part in the emergence of Athens as a Greek superpower.
A Greek superpower. Overview of the Laurion site. Athens' coinage dates back to around 530 BCE. The abundant resources from the Laurion mines allowed the city to mint a prolific coinage renowned for the quality of its silver. Like modern currency, Athens' coins had many different values and weights. The most struck denomination was the tetradrachm, which weighed 17.20 mgram. Is that micrograms? Is that the coin? No, hang on, what? I don't know what that is. The coin, as its name implies, was worth 4 tetras drachmae. The smallest coins and the ones most commonly used in the agora were the tribol, 2.5 gram, the obol and hemi-obol. Grams. Oh, can we do that? Counting.
Exploiting the mine's resources required a lot of labor. To meet this requirement and save on cost, Athens leased out mining concessions to its citizens, who had their slaves to do most of the work, alongside poor day laborers. In the 5th century BCE alone, there were anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 people toiling in the mines of Lavrion. Together, the workers managed to produce an estimated 20 tons of silver per year.
Ancient Greeks extracted a number of different metals like gold, silver, copper, tin, lead, iron, and mercury. The most precious metals, silver and gold, were appreciated for their quality and rarity. They were used to produce coins, but also jewelry, other luxury objects, and even statues like the gold and ivory statue of Athena of Parthenos. Most metals were traded in the form of ingots. Contemporary. I want to see where this picture's from. 22. I did look at that. Sorry. Wait, hang on. I'm eking this out, aren't I? This might be our last stream of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I said that before though, didn't I? From the Potosi mines.
Mining in Lavrion was a two-step process. First, the ore was extracted, and then it was refined. It took about 16 kilograms of raw ore to produce a single pure silver drachma of of about 4 grams. Recovered artifacts from the mines provide some insight into the specifics of the mining process. Galleries were dug to follow the veins of ore. They were small and did not offer much space for the workers. They were also hand-cut, and it's believed that it took whole days to dig only a few centimeters. Once the galleries finally reached the veins, the ore was extracted and then crushed on mortar stone to prepare it for washing.
That's incredible, isn't it? Revotive pinaxe. During the Peloponnesian War, the Spartans occupied and fortified Decalia, cutting Athens off from important roads. The slaves in Laurion took advantage of this opportunity, and 20,000 of them fled the mines. Because of this, silver extraction in Laurion ceased. The closing of the Laurion mines had a significant impact on Athens' economy. Its treasury gradually emptied, and it was left with no funds to rebuild its fleet. Deprived of resources, Athens was forced to melt 2 gold statues of Athena Nike to strike gold coins. The city also produced bronze coins covered in a thin silver layer to imitate and replace its tetradrachms, a move that was criticized by the comic playwright Aristophanes. In 404 BCE, when the Peloponnesian War was over, the mining of silver was virtually non-existent. It was only decades later, in 370 BCE, that entrepreneurs started testing mines again. However, when Alexander the Great obtained a large amount of Persian silver in his conquest, the price of silver dropped so much that the yields from the mines were no longer enough to cover their running costs. Did we look in the mine? Oh wait, can we work? Oh look, we can work in the mines. Anyway. Don't just stand there, pick up a... She did it before. There we go. Clink. Sorry, I just wanted to do that one more time.
Mine workers used washeries to help clean rock from the ore. The washing process required a large supply of water, but Lavrion was an infamously dry region. To compensate, cisterns were built in the mining area to collect and conserve seasonal rainwater. Once enough water had accumulated, workers poured it into wooden troughs containing rock and ore. The water's flow separated the lighter grains of rock from the heavier ore, which was caught in depressions at the bottom of the trough. The newly cleaned ore was collected for refinement, and the water was redirected back into a tank to be reused later.
The concept of using water to separate ore from rock is still applied today by modern gold miners. The washery of Thorkios, 2010.
Once the ore was clean and dry, it was ready for smelting. Its purpose was to isolate the silver in the ore. To do this, the ore was placed in a conical furnace filled with combustible charcoal. Bellows pumped air into the furnace to control the temperature. Inside, the ore burned, emitting a toxic smoke that was evacuated through a chimney. Eventually, the silver alloy was separated from the slag and collected for the last step in the refinement process, cupellation. Cupellation removed any leftover lead from the silver. The smelted alloy was placed in a cupel, an absorbent bowl made of bone ashes. It was then put in a furnace, where it absorbed the lead and left only silver behind.
The furnaces were used for smelting, and cupellation required an enormous amount of fuel. Based on evidence from South American silver mines exploited under similar conditions, it's estimated that ancient Greek mines required 10,000 tons of charcoal to produce 1 ton of silver. Oh shit, when was that picture from? 2007 was that? Yep, 2007.
While the mines of Lavrion belonged to Athens, the city frequently leased them to private citizens, who exploited the site for anywhere from 3 to 10 years. These citizens enlisted slaves and poor day laborers to carry out most of the work. The workers had a very low life expectancy, about 3 to 5 years, due to the hazardous working conditions. The dangers they faced included toxic lead vapor in the air and lung-choking dust in the galleries. However, they were fed well enough to keep up their work, and their combined labor managed to produce an estimated 20 tons of silver a year.
The Athenian politician Nicias once brought a Thracian slave named Sosias for 1 talent, the equivalent of 6,000 drachmae and 30 to 40 times more than the normal price of a slave. The reason for Sosias' high price was that he was an expert in searching for and finding silver tunnels. Because of this, Nicias installed Sosias as the administrator of the 1,000 slaves he'd already had working at the Lavrion silver mines. Nicias' purchase paid off, and according to Lysias, the politician eventually accumulated a fortune of 100 talents from his mining business.
I hope you enjoyed your trip through the mines. We talk so much of Athens' glory, but we often forget the city's power was due to tremendous amounts of work. Work that often had a great human cost. What else would you like to do?
Quiz.
Excellent. Let's begin. What was the last step in the silver refinement process?
Slag, something on it. Washing, cupellation. It was cupellation, right?
Washing the ore was done shortly after its extraction, but it was still early on in the process. Try again. Smelting isolated the silver in the ore, but it was not the final step in refinement. Try another answer. Extraction was actually one of the first steps in the mining process. Keep trying. Yes, cupellation removed any remaining lead, leaving only the silver behind. Now, for the second question. How did workers acquire water for the ore washing process? Lavrion was a very dry area, and there were no rivers close enough to be redirected. Pick another answer. No, importing water from the sea would have been too much work, even for the industrious miners. Try again. If they did beg Poseidon, their pleas fell on deaf ears because no such well existed. Try a different answer. Correct. The workers used cisterns to collect the seasonal rainwater. Now, the final question. Which famous battle did the mines help Athens win? The Battle of Nemea ended in a stunning Spartan victory against the allied Greek cities of Thebes, Argos, Corinth, and unfortunately, Athens. Try a different answer. This battle was between Sparta, Thebes, and Argos. Athens did not participate. Keep trying. The Battle of Chaeronea was fought against Philip II's Macedonian forces, and Athens was on the losing side. Try another answer. Correct. The Athenians used silver from the mines to finance a massive fleet for the Battle of Salamis. It's clear your visit has taught you much. A job well done, Wanderer. Of course. Please follow me.
I like how with the quiz question, it is quite light-hearted, isn't it? Because they don't. They say the same thing whether you get the questions right or wrong, which takes the pressure off, doesn't it? Messoria was one of the 4 villages that united in the 8th century BCE to form the Spartan city-state under the authority of 2 families of kings, the Eurypontids and the Aegiads. Learn about Sparta's different social classes and their conflict-filled history.
Welcome to Laconia, visitor. You're here to learn about Spartan society, yes? Then I won't stop you. Sparta is a glorious place, and you should feel honored to be here. Honored, and perhaps somewhat frightened. Honored, and perhaps somewhat frightened. Sparta had a unique hierarchy, especially compared to the rest of Greece. Everyone had their place, and you will soon learn what those places were. I will find you again once your visit has ended. Until then, visitor.
Sparta social classes.
Go. We will talk later.
Spartan society was structured around austerity, self-sufficiency, and a hostility towards foreign elements. It was divided into 3 social classes: citizens, perioikoi, and helots. Citizens were called Spartans, or homoioi. They were free men and women with mostly equal rights and wealth, though their contributions to political life were extremely limited. The perioikoi lived in surrounding areas under Spartan control. They cultivated the land and were primarily merchants and craftsmen. They were also part of the army, and their lands were the first line of defense in the event of a hostile attack. Helots were Sparta's lowest class. They were people who had lost their freedom to the Spartans, and they served the city as slaves. Helots were considered property instead of people. As a result, they had no political or civil rights.
Spartan society was puzzling not only to other ancient Greeks but to the modern historians, as historical sources are few and far between. In addition to the 3 main classes, Sparta's social system became even more complex in the classical period with the addition of subgroups like the Hippomeniones, the Bracedoi, the Mouthakes, and the Neodamodes. All of these groups were bound together not only by a fear of their brutal Spartan superiors, but also by the strict discipline that dictated life in Sparta.
Helots made up the majority of Sparta's population. According to Polydeuces, they lingered between slavery and freedom. 2 elements made Helots differ from other slaves. They were allowed to form their own families, and they were publicly owned by the city of Sparta instead of private citizens. Because helots were deemed public property, they could not be sold as merchandise. They mostly worked to cultivate the land, but also fought in wars alongside the Spartans. While they gave the fruits of their labor to Sparta, they also kept a fair part of it for themselves. This practice allowed some helots to make enough money to buy their own freedom. Alternatively, if a helot served the state well enough in military campaigns, they could also be granted civil rights.
According to Herodotus, the ratio of Spartans to Perikoi to helots was approximately 1:37. Modern historians, meanwhile, calculate that the population of Sparta in the 5th century BCE consisted of around 12,000 to 15,000 Spartans, 40,000 to 60,000 Perioikoi, and 140,000 to 200,000 helots. While sources are contradictory, ancient writers like Herodotus, Thucydides, and Plutarch say that Helots and Spartans were at odds with each other. While Helots aided Spartans in battles and military campaigns, they also frequently carried out attacks against Sparta's citizens. Aristoteles even informs us that the Helots were almost always prepared to take advantage of any misfortune that might befall their masters. At the same time, Spartans often treated Helots with great cruelty. This is especially evident in the incident that occurred possibly a year after the Battle of Cephketaria in 424 BCE. According to Thucydides, the Spartans secretly slaughtered 2,000 Helots, all of whom disappeared without a trace. 1st century Hellenistic Greece. What was this one?
It was. They were all helot.
Archaic Greece. Oh wait, can we fish?
Τι συνέβη μόλις?
Fishing.
The founding of Sparta is dated around the 9th century BCE. Historical information about the city is limited, but it was known to extend into the region of Laconia. Over time, Sparta started encroaching on the territory of Messenia, eventually leading to war. Sparta gained more land in this conflict, which they divided between their citizens and the Perioikoi. The aftermath of the Second Messenian War, from 640 to 620 BCE, then divided the population into three groups: the Homoioi, the Perioikoi, and the Helots. The Helots of Laconia mostly respected Sparta's rule and did not cause much trouble. However, Helots from Messenia supposedly resisted the Spartans, although sources can only confirm one revolt for certain, which occurred in Messenia in 464 BCE.
Spartans deployed helots in military expeditions both to reinforce their soldiers and to prevent possible slavery results back in Sparta. However, the latter strategy did not always work. In 464 BCE, Laconia was hit with an earthquake that sources say killed approximately 20,000 Spartans. Seeing an opportunity, the Helots took advantage of the quake's aftermath and revolted. The revolt was so serious that 2 years later, 462 BCE, Sparta was forced to appeal to their Peloponnesian allies, as well as Athens, for military aid. The Athenian general Cimon managed to assemble 4,000 hoplites to help the Spartans. However, the Spartans sent them away, worried that they would actually try to aid the Helots in an effort to undermine Sparta's power in the Peloponnese. The Spartans eventually quelled the revolt, but it greatly damaged the city's foreign policy and diplomatic relations, making it one of the greatest instances of social unrest in classical Sparta.
During the 5th century BCE, helots were quite active in the army, especially during the Peloponnesian War. They served as hoplites on land and as rowers during naval battles. In both cases, they gave Sparta an important numerical advantage. For every Spartan on the battlefield, there were at least 7 helots. Although many ancient sources say Spartans had a hostile relationship with helots, they were much more likely to treat them better in times of war. For example, when 300 helots and 120 elite Spartans were captured by Athens during the Battle of Sphacteria in 425 BCE, the Spartans promised the helots their freedom if they served them well in combat. Similarly, around the same time, the Spartan general Brasidas fought a battle alongside 700 helots. Impressed by their courage and loyalty, Brasidas later freed them all and allowed them to join the Perioikoi.
Helots who made great contributions in Spartan military campaign were dubbed Neodamodes and received their freedom, a unit of land, and possibly even political rights for their valiant efforts. Though the sources on them are vague, they numbered over 2,000 and participated in several Spartan campaigns during the classical period. The name Neodamodes suggests they were young people, neon, who formed new political communities, demos. The implementation of the Neodamodes group was probably part of Spartans' efforts to face the new social reality emerging in Greece during the second half of the 4th century BCE.
Perioikoi were another group of Sparta's population. They lived not in the city itself, but in its surrounding areas. The Perioikoi were never hostile against the Spartans. In fact, both groups together were known by the collective name Lacedaemonians. Perioikic cities had their own autonomy and sanctuaries, but they were always bound to Sparta. They were allowed to develop their own local laws and economies, but could never reach a level of prosperity that rivaled their parent state.
The main factor linking Spartans and Perioikoi was military service. The Perioikoi played an important role in the army, often backing up the forces of the Homoioi as hoplites. Spartans and Perioikoi allegedly fought together in army divisions known as lochoi. Thucydides' description of the Pylos campaign in 425 BCE mentions that of the 300 hoplites captured alive by Athenians, only 120 were Spartans and the rest were non-Spartans.
I see you've finished. I hope you have a better appreciation for Spartan society. Nothing we do is without reason, and every man, woman, and child has a role to play. What would you like to do? Is that so? Then let us begin. During which battle were Helots promised their freedom? It was Athens who fought the Persians at Marathon, not Sparta. Try again. Yes. In the Battle of Sphacteria, a group of elite Spartans promised to free their accompanying Helots if they helped the Spartans during a siege. Next question. Which of the following is another name for Spartan citizens? Spartan citizens were also called Omni, which meant equals. One final question. Which Spartan general freed 700 Helots? True, Pausanias was a Spartan general, but there is no record of him freeing 700 Helots. Try another answer. Thucydides was an Athenian general and historian. Try again. I regret to say I have not heard of this general. Though if they were from Sparta, I am sure they were noble and courageous. However, they're not the Spartan I'm looking for. Keep trying. Correct. Brasidas freed 700 Helots as a reward for their exemplary military service. You passed. I'm impressed. Then you may leave. Farewell, visitor.
Did we do 5 then? Did we do 5? I didn't count properly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, we did. Felt like 4. It's Brasidas. He's everywhere.
Nothing what?
Let's do the quiz again.
Yeah, we... No. What? We... Correct. Of course. Follow me.
Learn the nuances of Sparta's unique political system.
Greetings, visitor. You stand in Sparta's political center, where all of the city's most important decisions were made. You should feel honored. Spartans may be unequaled on the battlefield, but some situations are better solved by a meeting of minds than a clash of swords. Not many, mind you, but some. Sparta's political system was unique in the Greek world. While Athenians wasted hours on end whining and wagging their tongues at each other, Spartan kings made their decisions swiftly and deliberately. They preferred action over words. Come find me again when you finish your visit. We will speak more then. Farewell. Go. We will talk later.
Sparta's political system differed from most of Greece's. One of its most distinctive features was that it was ruled by 2 kings. These kings belonged to 2 separate dynasties, the Eurypontids and the Aegeads, both of which were said to be descended from Heracles. Both kings shared equal powers, and disputes between them required the intervention of special magistrates known as ephors. However, if one of the kings were more charismatic or experienced, they could influence the weaker king's choices. Sparta's political... One of its most distinctive features was these both...
Xenophon, who wrote the biography of the Spartan king Agesilaus, attests that the 2 kings and the ephors exchanged vows on a monthly basis. He writes that the ephors swore to preserve the kingship, but only on the condition that the kings followed the laws of Sparta. Originally, Sparta's 2 kings always came from different houses until the Hellenistic period, when Cleomenes III abolished the kingship of Sparta and placed his brother on the 2nd throne.
Spartan kings had several responsibilities and functions. As lifetime magistrates, they were technically Sparta's priests and strategists, and their duties encompassed everything from politics to justice. Originally, both kings would lead military campaigns in times of war. However, from 507 BCE onwards, only one of the 2 kings could be head of the army. On the battlefield, kings were accompanied by 300 elite soldiers for protection. But being a king wasn't only about working and fighting. They enjoyed special privileges as well. Spartan kings lived at the expense of the city, owned royal estates in the surrounding Perioikic cities, and received the majority of the spoils of war. When they passed away, they were buried with special honors, and the population mourned them for a period of 10 days.
During the classical period, various kings of Sparta, Cleomenes, Pausanias, Archibius, Agis II, were accused by the Gerousia of trying to pursue their own personal external policies. Furthermore, during the Greco-Persian Wars, the kings also ran the navy as navarchs, admirals, giving them power not only in their own lands, but away from them as well. The double kingship and the supervision of the kings by the ephors, as well as other measures, were demonstrative of Sparta's efforts to control the kings, limit their power.
The kings of Sparta enjoyed many important religious honors. They were in charge of sacrifices, both during military campaigns and at home. The kings received double portions of the meat at all communal meals, and they were also the first to pour libations. They also personally conducted public sacrifices as priests, which helped remind their subjects of their divine connection to Heracles and Zeus.
One of the Spartan kings' religious duties was appointing the Pythians, the people who received prophecies from the oracle at Delphi. Pythians were extremely important to Sparta as they received supposed foreknowledge that could help the kings prepare their military campaigns. Spartan kings were also believed to be descendants of Zeus. Because of this, they served as high priests of Zeus and enjoyed special privileges during religious rituals as well as on the battlefield. Hang on.
They also
Sacrificing a pig.
The ephors, or overseers, were 5 magistrates elected by the Spartan assembly. They were chosen from among Spartan citizens over 30 and served for 1 year with no possibility of re-election. The ephors played a large part in administrating the city and were considered the most democratic agents in the Spartan political system. They had judicial power and ordered the dispatching of the Spartan army during wars. They also met and negotiated with representatives from other states, in addition to running the Agoge, the Spartan education system. While not as powerful as the 2 kings, the ephors still held great sway over Sparta's affairs.
Hang on.
The ephors, or overseers, were 5 magistrates elected by the Spartan assembly. They were chosen from among Spartan citizens over 30 and served for 1 year with no possibility of re-election. The ephors played a large part in administrating the city and were considered the most democratic agents in the Spartan political system. They had judicial power and ordered the dispatching of the Spartan army during wars. They also met and negotiated with representatives from other states, in addition to running the Agoge, the Spartan education system. While not as powerful as the 2 kings, the ephors still held great sway over Sparta's affairs.
There are 4 different theories about the origins of the ephors. The first ties them to the lawgiver Lycurgus, who conceived them as guardians of the polity. The second prophesies that they were formed by the king Theopompus after the First Messenian War. According to the third theory, the ephors were former administrative officers who took advantage of the king's absence during wartime to acquire more power for themselves. The last theory dates back to the creation of the ephors to the The last theory dates the creation of the Ephors to the middle of the 6th century BCE and credits Chilon, an Ephor and one of the 7 sages of Greece, with forming a group meant to protect the people from the ambitions of the kings and the threat of tyranny. Although these theories are still discussed among researchers, it is generally agreed that the institution of Ephors probably appeared around the 8th century BCE, but only acquired its political purpose of defending the rights of citizens in the 6th century BCE. This development made the Ephors the most democratic element of Sparta's political system. Delacroix.
The Gerousia was the Spartan Council of Elders. It was made up of the 2 current kings, as well as 28 elders called Gerontes. They were Spartan citizens over the age of 60, the cutoff age for military duty. They were elected for life by the Spartan Assembly. The Gerousia, similar to Athens' Boulé, handled legislative and financial matters. It could submit bills and motions to the Assembly, and could also cancel Assembly decisions with the power of veto. To ensure that the right of veto did not weaken the Assembly, Ephors were introduced to keep the Gerousia in check and maintain a steady balance of power. This allowed Sparta to include more just elements in its political system.
According to Plutarch, the Great Rhetra was a Delphic oracle brought to Sparta by Lycurgus, the legendary lawgiver. The oracle allegedly gave Lycurgus the eunomia, good laws of Sparta, a term that has been erroneously used to describe the Spartan constitution. However, various sources indicate the eunomia was not a constitution, and instead many alluded to citizens obeying Spartan's law. Mainly alluded, okay. In a more general sense, the Great Rhetra referred to changes and modifications of existing constitutions and institutions in the Spartan government. While its exact origins are unknown, this text suggests that the people should be divided into phylae, tribes, and obae, vague territorial subdivisions. It also outlines Sparta's constitutional body in detail, including references to the Gerousia's probuletic power and their right to exercise veto when required. The Great Rhetra seems to have empowered the people of Sparta, providing hoplites with the political power to contribute to the government. This power helped avert tyranny, which was common in other cities of the Archaic period, where famous tyrants such as Phaleon of Argos, Orthogoras of Sicyon, and Kypselos of Corinth imposed their rule.
The Spartan Assembly, or the Apella, was made up of Spartan citizens who were over 30 years old. Its exact meeting place remains unknown, but it was presided over by a special member of the Ephors called the eponymous Ephor. The Apella had limited authority, since any decision it made could be overruled by the Gerousia. But thanks to the efforts of the Ephors, it still played an important role in Spartan society. The Apella dealt with topics like foreign affairs, war declarations, peace negotiations, and more. They also elected Ephors and Gerousia members, and could both grant political rights to foreigners and remove them from Spartan citizens. Unlike the myriad sources on the functions of the Athenian Assembly, the exact details of the Apella's decision-making process are unknown.
2017, Lycurgus, the legendary lawgiver of Sparta who supposedly lived in the middle of the 8th century BCE, is a figure who lingers between history and myth. Lycurgus is mentioned by many ancient authors such as Herodotus, Xenophon, and Plutarch, but it is not certain if he actually existed or if he is a symbolic figure attached to the reform of the social and political institution of Sparta. Am I saying that right? Lycurgus's biography, Plutarch mentions the lawgiver travelled in Crete, Asia Minor, and Egypt. He then returned to Sparta before visiting the oracle at Delphi to receive Sparta's new laws. Plutarch writes that after bringing reforms to Sparta, Lycurgus returned to Delphi to make a sacrifice to Apollo. This is the last time any of the sources mention him.
I see you finished. I hope you feel more knowledgeable about the inner workings of Spartan politics. Our way of ruling was not conventional, to say the least. But it served our purpose as well. What would you like to do? Argue? We shall see. Let's begin. What was the name of the Spartan Assembly? Correct. The Spartan Assembly was known as the Apella. Question 2. How many members did the Erosia have? No. Although we Spartans did love that number. Try a different answer. No. Try again. No. Yes. The Erosia consisted of 28 Yerondas and the 2 kings of Sparta. Last question. What was the name of the Spartan education program? Correct. Our rigorous education program was called the Aroi, and it was overseen by the Air Force. You've done well, Visitor. Very well. Correct. How many members? There were 28 Yeronters on the Council of Elders. But they weren't the only members of the Erosia. Keep trying. Yeah? What was the... You've done well. As you wish. Come with me.
Come with me if you want to leave. Cult of Cosmos member. Delve further into the workings of ancient Greek democracy.
Welcome, wanderer, to the democratic center of Athens, otherwise known as the Pnyx. The battles fought here may be more intellectual than bloody, but they are no less spectacular. These outcomes will affect an entire city in a different way.
That sun looks huge.
The Pnyx was the meeting place of the Athenian assembly and the physical embodiment of democracy at work. This tour will give you insight into how citizens made decisions and kept the city running. We can talk more when you have finished the tour. See you soon, wanderer. Enjoy your visit. I will see you soon.
How many we got left? 6. Hang on. 6, 7, 8, 9, 5, right?
The Athenian assembly was known as the Ecclesia. It met at the Pnyx 40 times a year to discuss various civic matters, and each session usually lasted a few hours. The word Pnyx is believed to mean something close to packed together. This was probably a reference to the fact that during meetings of the Ecclesia, the location would be filled to its capacity, with citizens packed in practically shoulder to shoulder. All male citizens were allowed to directly participate in the democratic process. Those over 20 years old had the right to speak and vote, while those over 30 could be elected to the higher position of magistrate. In total, there were approximately 30,000 citizens in Athens in the classical period. To draft and adopt decrees, 6,000 of them had to attend the meeting. All those in total.
Not every ancient Greek city was a democracy. In fact, most cities in the classical period functioned under two other forms of government, oligarchy and tyranny. Oligarchies were ruled by a small group of people. One example of an oligarchy in Spire, where a council of 28 elders controlled the majority of the political process. Tyranny, meanwhile, involved the ruling of a popular leader known as a tyrant. Tyrants would often seize control of cities in the face of external threats. Athens has experienced all three of these forms of government. Until 546 BCE, it was an oligarchy controlled by a few important families competing for political power. In 546 BCE, the aristocrat Persistratos seized complete power in the city with the help of a private army, and his family ruled as tyrants until their expulsion from Athens in 510 BCE. Democracy was established shortly afterward in order to avoid strife between aristocrats and prevent the rise of another tyrant.
Citizens came from all over Attica's 10 districts to attend the meetings of the Ecclesia. The meeting was presided over by an executive council called the Prytanes. Every session began with a sacrifice to Zeus Agoreos, the patron of the assembly. During the meeting, citizens delivered speeches from the Pnyx's platform on whatever issues the city faced. Afterwards, the issue was voted on with a show of hands from the gathered assembly. The Ecclesia made important decisions about subjects like grain importation, expenses, and declarations of war. While they could not directly enact laws, they had a say in appointing Athens' legislators, which gave them a large role in shaping the city's daily operations.
In Aristophanes' comedy Assembly Women, the playwright imagines a scenario in which the women of Athens seize control of the city's government and enact two major reforms: the abolition of private property and enforce sexual equality for old and unattractive women. Aristophanes' play treats the idea of women in the assembly as a joke, which is not surprising given that women were not allowed to be part of the assembly. However, women still played a public role in Athens in the form of religious rituals. Women were priestesses in over 40 major public cults, including the cult of Athena Polias, the Athens patron deity. Some festivals, such as the Themosphora, which was held in honor of Demeter, were also reserved exclusively for women. The Pnyx, 2005.
While some citizens only participated in the sessions of the Ecclesia, others could become more involved in democracy as magistrates. Magistrates were elected from among Athenian citizens over 30. They were often successful orators and charismatic politicians, and they held much more sway over important decisions than the average citizen. One of the most famous magistrates was Pericles, who was so popular he held his position for 15 years.
In theory, the Athenian democracy was supposed to give laborers as much power as aristocrats, but in practice the influence of the nobility remained strong. This is mostly because aristocrats had more resources available to them when it came to forging political alliances and maintaining their prestige. As a result, many elected officials from the 5th century BCE belonged to the aristocracy. For example, even the statesman Pericles championed many reforms that limited the power of aristocrats. He himself belonged to the Alcmenidae, a powerful family that claimed to be descended from the Homeric hero Nestor. After the death of Pericles in 429 BCE, a new breed of leaders emerged who did not belong to old nobility. Instead, they were wealthy merchants who earned their fortunes from trade or small factories rather than from land. Hang on. Their opponents called these new leaders demagogues, meaning leaders of the common people. One of the earliest and most well-known demagogues was Cleon, who gained popularity by advocating for policies that benefited the general population, as such paying people for jury duty. He was also famous for taking a very aggressive stance against Sparta during the Peloponnesian War and for attempting to remove his opponents from office by accusing them of false charges. Right.
In theory, every Athenian citizen over the age of 20 had the right to participate in the assembly. However, some of them lived far from the city, and others could not financially afford to miss a day of work to attend meetings. For these reasons, the city introduced a special allowance called a misthos ecclesiasticos in the 4th century BCE, meant to encourage participation. Originally, it was 2 obols, but the politician Cleon raised it to 3.
In Aristophanes' play Archinaeans, the Athenian citizens were so disinterested in democracy that they deserted to the Pnyx to loiter in the agora. To combat this complacency, a group of slaves wandered the city, herding the citizens back to the Pnyx using ropes dyed with red paint. Any citizen who tried to escape was marked with the paint and then fined for refusing to participate in democracy. While the story is an exaggeration, the city did actually close its shops and attempt to funnel people to the Pnyx on days when the assembly was meeting. This is because in the 5th century BCE, Athens had great difficulty convincing its citizens to attend the assembly. However, the situation changed in the 4th century BCE when citizens started getting paid for attending meetings, which helped compensate for any lost working hours. The Pnyx was also enlarged to include up to 8,500 citizens and was later enlarged to fit around 13,000 citizens. Clearly, money was a better motivator than red rope. So what happened? Oh. Eh? How did what? Oh shit, sorry. Easy right so
Athens introduced several innovations that heavily influenced modern society, including theater, architecture, and philosophy. However, their greatest contribution was their democratic government, which introduced the concept of a city ruled by its citizens. The decision to adopt democracy as a government, a choice made in 508 BCE, shaped civilization as we know it, and continues to affect us today.
In 1792, American revolutionary Thomas Paine wrote in The Rights of Man that what Athens was in miniature, America will be in magnitude. While modern democracies are much larger and more complex than that of Athens, they both share many qualities. For example, just as Athens' democracy was born out of a reaction to the tyranny of Pisistratos and his sons, most influential Western democracies were also reactions against perceived tyranny, such as the American colonies revolting against the British or the French revolutionaries fighting against the old regime. But perhaps the most enduring part of Athens' democracy is the idea that political power rests with the people. This central concept was preserved by Greek philosophers and historians under Roman rule, passed on to medieval scholars, and championed by the modern political activities who laid the foundations for our current systems of government.
However, these
Classical Greece. And where was this from?
however,
Roman period.
Hello again, Wanderer. I trust you appreciated learning about the inner workings of the city. Is there anything else you'd like to do?
Take a quiz.
Then let's start with a simple question. Approximately how many citizens were in Athens in my time?
Fuck me, I don't know.
That's too low a number for this big city. Try again. What? There aren't that many people living in the entire world, let alone in the city of Athens. Try a different answer.
30... Oh no, that's billion, isn't it?
Athens' general population was believed to be around 300,000, but only a select few of this number were citizens. Keep trying. Yes, there were approximately 30,000 citizens in Athens, although the population as a whole was much larger. On to the second question.
Put my leg down.
Who
Oh.
of the following was a famous Athenian magistrate?
Leonidas.
Leonidas was a Spartan warrior king. Try again. Perseus was a legendary hero, but he was never an Athenian magistrate. Try another answer.
Oops.
Yes, Pericles was an extremely popular magistrate who managed to keep his position for 15 years. Only one question left. What does the word Pnyx mean? Correct. The Pnyx was usually crowded with citizens attending meetings of the Ecclesia. You know enough about democracy to be a politician yourself. Well done, Wanderer. Yeah? Plato was brilliant and eloquent, but he was a philosopher, not a magistrate. Keep trying. Yeah. What?
Oh shit, that is the right answer. Sorry.
Yeah. What? People may have met at the Pnyx, but its name did not mean meeting place. Try again. I'm afraid not, although people often gave speeches during sessions. Keep trying.
She's being very nice to us, isn't she?
An accurate description, but incorrect. Try another answer. You. It would be my pleasure to take you to your next destination. Follow me.
Parthenon. Oh yeah, we read that, didn't we? Receive a crash course in ancient Greek philosophy.
Welcome to the Gymnasium of the Kinosages, one of the many places where philosophers came to enrich the mind and enlighten the spirit. There is no better setting for learning than in a quiet place far away from the commotion of the city. Education held a very important place in Greek society. The most prominent educators were philosophers, whose teachings ranged from everyday rituals to the makeup of the universe. Once your tour is complete, come find me, and we can discuss what you've learned. Farewell for now, Wanderer. Enjoy your visit. I will see you soon.
Philosophy comes from the Greek word philosophia, or love of wisdom. This concept was in direct contrast with philochromatia, love of money, and philotimia, love of honor. As of the second half of the 5th century BCE, Athens was known as Greece's capital of philosophy. Due to the rise of democracy, there was an increasing need for education beyond the basic subjects of elementary school. Athenian citizens needed to be able to participate in various functions of the democratic state, such as being elected for office, proposing new laws, engaging in military decisions, or simply defending their rights.
Greek philosophy was born in Ionia after the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. The first philosophers dedicated themselves to natural philosophy and were called physikoi or physiologoi. The discourses of the physicoi were written in verse, similar to Homeric poems, but while epic poems explain the world in terms of gods and mythology, psychoi explored more rational causes for natural phenomena. The founder of the so-called Melanesian school of natural philosophy was Thales, who declared that water was the principal substance of all things. Thales was first to propose a material and rational element as a principle of the world. The Ephesian school was also interested in the natural world. Heraclitus of Ephesus posited that all things in the universe are in a state of perpetual flux, connected by a logical structure called logos. According to Heraclitus, fire was the first principle of the cosmos. Due to Persian military expansion and political troubles, some Ionian intellectuals had to migrate and take refuge in southern Italy, such as Pythagoras of Samos. Pythagoras founded a school in the town of Croton, where he had numerous disciples, including the legendary wrestler Milo of Croton. Pythagoras, is Pythagoras, is credited with many mathematical and geometrical discoveries, and also believed in the transmigration of the soul after the death. All these pre-Socratic philosophers were polymaths. Their philosophy was a mix of cosmology, mathematics, geometry, medicine, and ethics, and later sophists were inspired by the all-encompassing nature of their teachings. Oh shit.
Originally, Athens had no official school buildings for higher education. Sophists and philosophers taught either in private homes or in public spaces like the theater. To recruit young pupils for long-term curricula, they also held classes in gymnasia, where young Athenians underwent physical training. The Cynosarges was a sanctuary to Heracles, located in the south suburb of Athens. At the beginning of the 4th century BCE, Antisthenes used this sanctuary as a teaching spot for his school of philosophy, the aptly named Cynicism.
The thing's gone. Pericles implemented many cultural policies that helped transform Athens into the center of Greek culture. He invited philosophers like Anaxagoras and Protagoras, as well as other intellectuals, to gather in the city. As a result, many great philosophers were born in Athens, the most famous of which were Socrates and Plato. The philosophical talent in Athens attracted pupils from all over the Greek world. For example, Aristoppos came from Cyrene to follow Socrates' teachings, while Diogenes came from Sinope to study under Aristophanes. Originally, philosophers and sophists taught in private houses, gymnasia, or public places, but during the 4th BCE, permanent schools of philosophy began appearing in Athens, with Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum being the first philosophical institutions. The schools included gardens, rooms for teachers, students and guests, and a library. However, not all philosophers approved of institutional education. Case in point, Diogenes the Cynic, who lived in a barrel and delivered his teachings and delivered his teachings in public space. During the 5th and 4th centuries BCE was filled with philosophers' books, debates, and ideas. This lasted until the 6th century CE, when the last philosophers of Athens were expelled by an edict from the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. Can we activate that thing again? Garden of Cynosarges. This place owes its origins to the hero Diodemus, who, wanting to make a sacrifice to the god of wine, had stopped was stopped by a white Argos dog, Kunos, who stole the animal he intended to sacrifice.
Any free citizen was allowed to involve themselves in the Athenian democratic process. However, to truly influence the flow of politics, their speech and rhetoric skills had to be impeccable. As a result, many sophists taught subjects like logic, reason, and eloquence.
The School of
These were meant
Logic.
to help students achieve arete, or excellence. But this specific concept of excellence was often challenged, especially by other philosophers. For example, Plato, Socrates, and Isocrates preferred a more moral approach and argued that rhetoric should be used as a means to serve the greater good. Socrates and Plato went even further, declaring that philosophy and wisdom were not only useful tools, but also ethical virtues.
Socrates was born in 469 BCE. His philosophy can be summarized by his exemplary lifestyle. Oh, that's his long. When he was 40, the oracle at Delphi said Socrates was the wisest of all living men. He was puzzled by the statement because he believed he knew nothing, and from then on he began an investigation into the truth of the oracle's words by searching for someone wiser than him. In Athens, he questioned famous people of all professions to test their knowledge. He went to politicians, orators, poets, rhapsodies, and sophists, and their conversations were always the same. Using irony and refutation, he proved these arrogant specialists did not know what they thought they knew. He also tried convincing his fellow citizens to scorn money, honor, and prestige, and to instead focus on improving the wealth of their souls. Philosophy was Socrates' only occupation. He never wrote any books, and preferred to teach orally. Unfortunately, this did not make him much money, and he allegedly spent his whole life in poverty, wearing the same coat and always traveling barefoot. The public nature of Socrates' work made him a lot of enemies, and generated hatred from Athenians who did not agree with his ideas. However, he also attracted many young Athenians who admired his outspokenness and intelligence. Some of his younger pupils, such as Plato and Xenophon, went on to write their own philosophical works. In 399 BCE, the city of Athens charged Socrates with 2 offenses: not believing in the city's gods and corrupting the youth. He was sentenced to death and condemned to drink a poisonous beverage of hemlock. During his stay in prison, some friends tried to convince him to escape, but Socrates refused, preferring to comply with the city's laws. Wise to the end, Socrates chose to die instead of giving up his philosophical lifestyle.
Ancient Greek philosophy was multidisciplinary in nature. In addition to wisdom and logic, philosophers also studied and taught math, geometry, music theory, and even medicine. For example, the philosopher Prodicus wrote a treatise called On Human Nature, where he outlined various explanations on human physiology. Philosophy's influence was also great enough to affect medicine. Hippocratic physicians were known to incorporate philosophical ideas into their work, and the treatise On Airs seems to be influenced by pre-Socratic theories on air being the first principle of the universe.
The Platonic Academy was founded in 388 to 387 BCE outside the walls of Athens. Its entrance had an inscription that said, "Let no man enter who has not studied geometry," and it is clear from the Platonic dialogues that Plato and his school spent lots of time studying math. Many mathematicians and geometers taught or worked in Plato's school, including Archytas, a Pythagorean philosopher, and Eudoxos of Cnidos, a geometer and astronomer. The academy gave students the opportunity to develop new theories in mathematics and astronomy. For example, Eudoxus devised mathematical models of the planetary motions, and Speusippos, Plato's nephew and eventual successor as the head of the academy, conceived a model of the physical universe that involved geometric figures. What? I did read that, right?
famed philosopher Socrates had an ambiguous relationship with sophists. In Plato's dialogues, Socrates is portrayed as being in constant opposition with the famous sophists of his time. Aristophanes' comedy, The Clouds, meanwhile, depicts Socrates as a sophist himself, constantly demanding payment for his teachings. Socrates was in fact very poor and made no money off his teachings. He also differed from the sophists in that while they only taught aristocratic youths, Socrates taught everyone, regardless of station. Unfortunately, his controversial ideas and practices did not sit well with the city of Athens, and he was eventually tried for impiety.
Nowadays, the term sophist has negative connotations and refers to the use of bad and fallacious arguments. The pejorative view of the word can be traced back to Plato, who saw sophists as main adversaries. However, sophist is actually derived from Sophia, the Greek word for wisdom, and originally meant wise man. In ancient Greece, the sophists represented a new professional group that made a living off teaching specialized subjects like rhetoric and persuasion. Their instruction was meant to encourage critical thinking about topics like morality, politics, and religion. However, the sophists were not an organized collective, and members taught their own individual beliefs. Because they taught in return for a fee, sophist schools were only attended by those who could afford it, usually members of the aristocracy and wealthy families. However, they also showcased their skills at different public events. For example, the sophist Gorgias once delivered Athens' annual funeral oration honoring the victims of war, and Hippias presented at Olympia on multiple occasions. Protagoras of Abdera is generally considered as the first professional sophist. He trained his pupils to argue from both points of view because he believed that truth could not be limited to one side of an argument. He claimed to be able to make the weaker argument stronger, and is author of the famous saying, "Man is the measure of all things," meaning truth is relative and differs according to each individual. He also opposed traditional religious values by defending an agnostic view of the gods, saying, "Concerning the gods, I have no means of knowing whether they exist or not, nor of what sort they may be, because of the obscurity of the subject and the brevity of human life."
Philosophy was not only a collection of ideas, but a way of life. According to philosopher Pierre Hadot, his ancient counterparts had a daily regime of spiritual exercises to combat their passions, doubts, and illusory beliefs. These exercises included meditation on death, contemplation of nature, or speaking with a friend or mentor. Philosophers also followed specific dress codes and diets. They were also part of a community of masters and students. These communities were created and strengthened in schools. Plato founded such a school in the early 4th century BCE, when he purchased a property in a grove just outside of Athens. The school was designed to groom students into philosopher citizens who could eventually rule the city in a measured and fair manner. It followed its own rules and was open to both male and female disciples.
Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in Stagira. He came to Athens at the age of 17 and studied under Plato at the academy. He spent some 20 years in the school until Plato's death in 347 BCE. After traveling through Greece, he settled at the court of Philip II of Macedon in 343 BCE to tutor a young Alexander the Great. Aristotle came back to Athens in 335 BCE to set up his own school, the Lycaon, which became the city's second center of learning. The members of his school were called Peripatetics, or those who walk around. This was either because Aristotle talked while walking around the premises, or because there was a covered walkway called a peripatos in the gymnasium of the school. At the Lycaon, Aristotle set up a library that would become the model for the Library of Alexandria. Research took place on a large scale, as evidenced by the titles of Aristotle's books. He engaged in physics, psychology, politics, zoology, and literature. Famous disciples also participated in his research programs. Theophrastos of Erosus wrote on botany and stones. Eudemos of Cyprus composed a history of mathematics, and Aristoxenos of Tarentum wrote a book on harmonics. After the death of Alexander, Aristotle denounced for impiety and had to flee Athens. He took refuge in he was denounced in Euboea, where he died in 322 BCE. For Aristotle, happiness, eudaimonia, was the ultimate goal in life, and money, honor, and pleasure were only means to reach that happiness, not ends in themselves. Furthermore, since it's rationality that distinguishes humans from plants and animals, our purpose and function is to use reason. A happy life is thus a life of reason, and according to Aristotle, the life of theoretical inquiry is the happiest life of all.
I can tell by the crease in your brow that you're already puzzling over the new things you've learned. Don't be embarrassed. Even the wisest among us need to ask questions before they search for answers. Is there anything else you'd like to do? You wish to test your wisdom? Very well. Let's see how you compare to the great philosophers. The first question is an easy one. What does philosophia mean? There was a word for the love of money, but it was philochrimatia, not philosophia. Try a different answer. Philothymia was the love of honor. Try again. Logic was a large part of philosophical teachings, but the word philosophia did not refer to it directly. Keep trying. Correct. Philosophia referred to the love of wisdom. Time for the next question. The Kynosarges was a sanctuary dedicated to which Greek hero? Correct. It was the mighty Heracles. Now, for the last question. Which play by Aristophanes portrayed Socrates as a sophist? Yes, The Clouds was a comedy that portrayed the famous philosopher as a greedy sophist. Plato even believed that this caricature contributed to his mentor's eventual trial and execution. Well done, Wanderer. Even Socrates would be impressed by the depths of your wisdom. You wish... what? I'm afraid the Kynosarges was not a sanctuary to Odysseus. Keep trying. Now, which play by... The Frogs was an interesting comedy in that it focused on gods and heroes instead of mortals. Socrates was not part of the play's proceedings, though. Keep trying. Aristophanes' The Birds was a lovely play, but it did not feature Socrates. Try another answer. The Wasps was a comedy that mocked Athenian courts of law, but had no appearances from Socrates. Try again. Well. Very well. I'll take you there. Follow me.
Biscuits in ancient Greece were sprinkled with salt during symposiums to simulate or sustain guests' thirst so they could drink more. People do that in pubs nowadays, don't they? Salty snacks. Salty snacks. 6. Hang on, how many have we got? 6, 7, 8, 9. 3. Really? Oh. We're well on our way. School of Greece philosophy. See how ancient Greeks grew and cultivated one of the most important parts of their diet.
Greetings, my friend. Welcome to Arcadia, home of shepherds, sheep, and manure. I recently made an offer to buy some nearby farmland. Unfortunately, the owner refused, based on completely unsubstantiated rumors that I once burned down 3 farms in Kos. Can you believe it? I've never burned down a farm in my life. I may have once paid someone else to do so, but I assure you, my reasons were entirely acceptable and in the best interest of everyone involved. Arcadia was well known for its sublime natural vistas. Farmers and shepherds were seduced by its beauty, and it's easy to see why. I have to leave for now, but I'll meet you again when you finish your visit. Until then, my friend.
Hang on, I'm gonna have to start that again. Where are we? Arcadia. The horse's legs sank into the buried pots, breaking. Oh God.
Greetings, my friend. Welcome to Arcadia. Arcadia was farmers. I have to...
Wheat and agriculture.
Grain was a staple of the Greek diet, to the point where Homer referred to his compatriots as mortal eaters of bread. Grain farming was a meticulous process. Due to dry summers, artificial irrigation was impossible, so farmers had to rely on rainfall to water their crops. This gave them very narrow windows for sowing and harvesting. On a farm of this size, only half of the field would be planted every year, while the other half would lie fallow to avoid exhausting the soil. According to the poet Hesiod, the best time to sow grain was in autumn, and the best time to harvest it was in May. Fortunately, if farmers missed their opportunity, they also had a chance to plant millet in the spring.
Hesiod was a farmer turned poet from the town of Ascra in Boeotia. In the 7th century BCE, he composed the Theogony, an epic poem dedicated to telling the origins of the gods. He also wrote a poem on how to live justly called Works and Days. The poem included a detailed agrarian calendar that outlined when to plant and harvest, in addition to addressing subjects like the ideal time to marry. Hesiod's poetry was so famous in antiquity that Herodotus credits him with teaching the Greeks about their gods. Fuck. I can't read today for some reason. Archaic Greece.
Before planting in a field, the land needed to be plowed a total of 3 times. Once in the spring to remove weeds, again in the summer to aerate the soil, and a final time in the winter to plant the seeds in the moist earth. The plow was pulled by 2 oxen, while the sowing of seeds was done by hand. After the seeds were planted, a boy turned the soil with a hoe to protect them from hungry birds. Once the sowing was finished, the farmers waited for winter rains to irrigate the field. They also prayed to the goddess of agriculture, Demeter, and her daughter Persephone, in the hopes of being favored with a bountiful harvest come springtime.
Demeter, the goddess of grain, was the sister of Zeus. When her daughter Persephone was chosen to be Hades' bride without Demeter's permission, the goddess withheld all crops until Zeus pledged to release Persephone. Demeter's actions led to famine and forced Zeus to relent. He allowed Persephone to spend half of the year underground as Queen of the Underworld and the other half above ground with her mother. The story draws parallels to the planting of grain, which also spends time underground before growing on from the soil. The painter Nikos Thenes.
Grain was harvested in the spring using a curved knife called a sickle. With their backs to the wind, the reapers cut the plant stalks and left the sheaves behind before moving through the rest of the crop. Once the harvest was mowed, the sheaves were brought to the threshing floor.
Animal sacrifices played a large part in ancient Greek religion, but cereals also had an important sacred role. Alphyta, or barley meal, was brought to animal sacrifices to scatter over both the animal's head as well as its roasting meat. The Greeks also offered the gods bloodless sacrifices like cakes. The cakes would be baked into specific shapes depending on the god or the type of ritual, and were made with ingredients like cheese, nuts, honey, cereals, and dried fruit. For example, in Athens, people offered the goddess of Artemis a special cheesecake known as amphipon. The Greeks also made a point of honouring gods with archaea, or the first fruits of their farming, hunting and fishing labours. Greeks brought arpachae of wheat and barley to Demeter after the spring harvest in the hopes of ensuring fertility. Failing to honour a god with arpachae was believed to inspire divine anger that would lead to dire consequences.
Animal husbandry was an important part of Greek agriculture. Farmers usually kept cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, pigs, dogs, geese, and chickens. The animals mostly fed in pastures, but could also eat some of the farm's harvested grain, as well as damaged fruit and residue from olive oil and wine production. Livestock had several purposes. Their manure was used to fertilize the fields, and their grazing helped remove weeds. Arcadia was a mountainous region believed to be the home of the god Pan, so farmers were more likely to keep sheep and goats than cattle.
I will not bother with this cattle. That's a quote from The Darkness. We should play the Darkness game. Anyway, animals were kept on farms for both their labour and for the secondary products they provided. Much of the heavy labour on the farm was done by oxen and donkeys, who helped pull ploughs and wagons. Sheep and goats, meanwhile, were kept for meat, but their milk was also used for cheese. Omnivorous pigs ate table scraps, and dogs helped herd and protect other animals. Cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs were also offered as sacrifices to the gods.
Most farming tools were simple handmade implements made of wood and occasionally tipped with iron. The most complicated tool was the plough, which was made up of several parts, including a beam, a drawbar, and a yoke. A two-pronged hoe, meanwhile, was used for tilling soil.
Must be yoking.
Farmers also had tools for digging and weeding.
In Athens, land tenure and productivity were reflected in a citizen's political and social status. Citizens were ranked according to property classes, with the top tier owning holdings that produced a minimum of 500 bushels per year, and the lowest tier owning no land of their own. In Sparta, meanwhile, the land was distributed equally amongst Spartan citizens, who were supported by the crop farming of their helots. What? Nah, shit.
After the sheaves were harvested, workers brought them to the threshing floor to extract the grain. Oxen or donkeys were hitched to a post in the center of the floor and guided around it, while workers threw sheaves under their hooves. The animals, stomping, forced the grain kernels out of their casings. Afterwards, the kernels were collected for the winnowing process. Winnowing helped separate the heavier grain seeds from the chaff. It began with using a wooden shovel to toss the grain. While in the air, the wind blew away the lighter chaff, leaving only the heavier grain. To remove the remaining chaff, the grain was tossed in a wooden basket called a lignon, which filtered the grain until only clean kernels remained.
Wow, it's like an art, isn't it, to do all that? Like imagine how you'd think, I suppose it's experience, isn't it? Thinking of different ways to separate the different things. The Greeks used grain products to make a large variety of food and beverages. A coarse barley meal was called alphyta, could be sprinkled into water, milk or wine to make a nutritious and occasionally medicinal potion called cacaon. Hippocratic doctors prescribed cacaon laced with pennyroyal to women, and the beverage was also drunk during the initiation rites at the Eleusinian mysteries, which were held in honor of Demeter and Persephone. Alphyta was also used to make a medicinal drink called tisane. Crimon, meanwhile, was a wheat meal that was used to make bread called crimatistius, while unmilled wheat called amylos was boiled into a starchy pudding with the consistency of jelly. Greeks also knew how to make beer from barley, but unlike the Egyptians, they did not enjoy the drink much and preferred wine. 1936.
Most of them are
Roman period. And what was this one?
to remove the
Hide text. Oh, I wanted to collect that tree.
to remove.
What is it? Threshing in the Grain and Naxos photograph. Note on Elizabeth Mashkova.
Barley, which was used to make flour, was different from other types of grain. Threshing was not enough to separate the barley from its husk, so instead it was roasted in a specialized tool called a frigatron. After the barley was roasted, it was pounded with a mortar and pestle. The pounded grain was then ground into a meal, using either a hand mill or a hopper mill. Grinding was boring work, so workers often lightened the mood with a mill song. Once the barley was completely ground, it was sieved using a wicker basket called a koskinon, making it ready for use.
The two staple grains of the Greek diet were barley and wheat. In fact, during the classical period, their diet is thought to have been around 70 to 75% cereal-based. Wheat flour, called aleuron, was used to bake bread called artos, but the Greeks also needed a barley meal called alphyta with water, milk, or oil to produce maza, a porridge or flatbread that could be eaten on the go. In Sparta, boys ate kamata after their meal, which were cakes of barley meal soaked in oil and served on a bed of laurel leaves. They also ate pancakes called tikanites for breakfast. The variety of Greek cakes and breads is astounding. Athenaeus listed over 70 kinds in Sophists at dinner.
Grain storage areas needed to be dark, dry, cool, contained, and well ventilated to prevent the grain from spoiling. According to Hesiod, the preferred method of storing grain was in a pithos, the same container as Pandora's mythological box. Archaeological evidence suggests that Greeks may have also stored grain in small, walled structures woven from branches. Farms generally needed to store enough grain to sustain themselves for the year and seed corn for the next. Any surplus was either stored for a lean year or sold to markets for profit.
Not all land was owned by private individuals. Sanctuaries could encompass sacred land as well. Sacred land could be cultivated by priests, leased out to other people, or set aside entirely. There are often rules for using the land. For example, strangers visiting the sanctuary of Athena and Elea were allowed to pasture one animal for 1 day and 1 night, but if they stayed any longer, they were required to pay a fine.
My friend! Good to see you again! You must feel hungry. I know I would, spending all that time watching farmers working themselves to the bone. Now, what else can I do for you?
Quiz time.
If you say so, let's get started. According to Isiodos, what was the best month to start harvesting grain?
Dunno.
Fall was the preferred time to plant the seeds, not to harvest the grain. Keep trying. Close, but a little bit too early. Try again. Yes, spring was the ideal time for harvesting. Guess I'm not the only smart one around here. Time for another question. Which tool did reapers use to cut stalks? Yes, a sickle was a curved knife, making it ideal for harvesting sheaves of grain. Only one question left. Arcadia was believed to be the home of which god? Athena was the patron of Athens. She didn't even live in Arcadia. Try again. Correct. Pan supposedly called the mountainous region his home. Incredible work, my friend. It's safe to say your mind is definitely more wheat than chaff. January was far too wet for grain harvesting. Try another answer. Yes. Which tool? No, the plow was used to prepare the soil. Try again. No, that probably would have resulted in a lot of accidental maiming. Ouchie. Try
Ouchie.
another. No, that probably would have Try another. Hoes were used to till the soil, not cut the stalks. Keep trying. Yes, a sickle was a curved knife, making it ideal for only Arcadia. Zeus preferred Mount Olympus over the mountains of Arcadia. Try a different answer. Panakia was Asclepios' daughter, and didn't really have a connection to Arcadia. Keep trying though, my friend. Of course. Just follow me, and we'll be there in no time.
Only 2 left in there. Armies would hire wheat and agriculture. Visit the Karakamaios at the pottery capital of classic Athens. Is there 2 left? 7, 8, 9. Yeah. Visit the classical Athens.
Hello, wanderer. May I introduce you to the Keramikos, the kiln that warms all of Athens' pottery. The art produced here is some of the most beautiful in the Greek world. I envy the potter's skills, though I'm not quite as envious of their clay-stained hands. It's bad for the nails. The Keramikos was a special neighborhood in Athens, where potters created vases and containers that stood all over Greece. This tour will take you through the elaborate process needed to turn something as simple as muddy clay into ornate perfume vases and gilded wine cups. Come find me when you complete your visit, and we can talk more about what you've learned.
No, hang on, I'm going to start that again. What? Was it pottery in Athens? Damn it.
Greetings. It is all when you.
We got too many screenshots of this game, haven't we?
Hello, Wander. Vakeramikos. This tour will take you through the elaborate process. Come find me when you complete your visit, and we can talk more about what you've learned.
The Kerameikos was a large, sprawling area northwest of Athens' Acropolis. While part of it was used as a graveyard, it was also dedicated to the creation of pottery. The Kerameikos was so significant to the art form that its name lives on in the word ceramics. Perhaps drawn by the river, potters moved into the area and formed their own bustling community. It's believed that by the end of the 5th century BCE, hundreds of thousands of pottery vessels had been made in Athens, including everything from heavy, undecorated cooking pots to delicate and beautiful containers reserved for the most precious oils. Sadly, only around 1% of these works survive today, some only in small fragments.
Unfortunately, no ancient manuals for making pottery have survived to the present day, and there is only a limited visual and textual evidence to explain how ceramic works were created. However, the vases themselves provide a few clues. Some pots were decorated with behind-the-scenes glimpses at potters and painters at works. These visual narratives, along with the texts of ancient authors, suggest that pottery making was a family affair, with fathers teaching their sons the craft at a young age. One vase even shows a woman working as a painter, which again suggests that pottery making was a family business.
Raw clay from a river was hardly fit for a potter's wheel. Athenian potters used clay that was rich in iron, which created the distinctive orange-red coloring seen in Athenian pottery. But this high-quality clay needed to be handled carefully to avoid disasters in the kiln later on. The clay was first brought to settling beds, where it was mixed with water to wash out any organic debris like leaves. Once it was purified, workers kneaded the clay with their hands to push out air bubbles and create the texture necessary for a flawless finish. One of the goals of these early steps was to remove any impurities that could destroy a delicate design, or worse, render a vase unusable.
While we describe Athenian vases as painted, their red and black designs weren't actually the result of paint, but a special preparation of the clay itself known as a slip. Levigated slips were named after a process in which water was used to help refine the finest particles of clays from the coarser, heavier ones, leaving a solution that was equal parts water and clay. Different clays with different mineral compositions offered a palette of options for pottery makers. For example, white clays were used to add light highlights and For example, white clays were used to add light highlights in black and red figure scenes. Slips were also a key element of vase construction and were used to help attach segments of larger vases together and to help anchor elements like handles to the body of the vessel. From a what? A votive pinax.
Once the clay was cleaned, it was up to the potter to shape it into a vase by spinning it on a wheel or pressing it into a mold. Their choice depended on what shape they wanted for the vase, but they also considered the possible scope of its decoration. Potters did not work alone. A workshop might have had many people working together on different aspects of production. Potters collaborated with many different painters for decorating their creations. Some of these painters even became potters themselves. All in all, a single vase could be worked on by many different artists, with each one focusing on a different aspect of its design.
Vases often had inscriptions known as poietes, or signatures that identified the workshop or owner responsible for the overall production of the vase. Sometimes a vase named both its potter and its painter. Most Athenian potters and painters remain anonymous, but over the years scholars have identified the specific styles of hundreds of individual artists and workshops. Even though their names have been lost, these identifications have been achieved by examining different qualities of the vases, such as the placement of the relief lines, sketch designs, and even the shapes of painted eyes and noses. History is in the ground.
After the pots were shaped and decorated, they were packed into kilns for the lengthy and delicate firing process. The process had 3 stages: oxidation, reduction, and reoxidation. The main purpose of the firing process was to carefully manage the clay's exposure to oxygen. The chemical reactions caused by firing gave the pots their distinctive orange-red coloring. This also turned the designs made from the clay decoration slips glossy and black. The most difficult part of the firing process was managing the fires themselves. It required an enormous amount of skill and experience to properly judge the exact temperatures needed, and even the smallest mistake could ruin several hours of work.
Experimental archaeological projects and scientific advancements have changed the way researchers understand the ancient firing process. For example, instead of firing a single cycle, it's possible some pottery workshops fired vases twice or even more. While discarded shards, misfires, and damaged or unfinished vases may seem like mistakes, they actually offer new clues as to how ancient Greek pottery workshops functioned. A misfired black figure cup.
Vases could be decorated in all sorts of ways. Before 530 BCE, Athenian vases were decorated using the black figure technique, where figures and designs were painted as dark silhouettes. At the end of the 6th century BCE, painters created a new technique called red figure, an inversion of the painting process that left the figures in red and the background in black. This gave the artist more freedom to better explore details like muscles and individual locks of hair. Designs were sketched onto the bare surface of the pot using a thin, sharp tool. Thin relief lines, which helped define subtle elements like facial features, were added using a brush made of a few stiff hairs. More elaborate vases were sometimes gilded, but these decorations were so delicate, they were most likely only added after the firing process.
Designs were not painted onto the vases in the same way we view painting today. Athenian vase painters used a kind of slip, a mixture of clay and water, that became a glaze when the vase was fired. Different dilutions and concentration allowed artists to adjust qualities like color and opacity for even finer designs. Amesis made me. Amesis epoi.
You've returned! As you can see, pottery was an arduous and delicate process, but was exemplary of the skill and craftsmanship that dominated Greek art and culture. Now, is there something else you'd like to do? Then let's get right to it, starting with an easy question. What was responsible for the orange-red color of most Athenian vases? Paint was not the main source of the vase's distinctive coloring. Try again. Organic debris like leaves were actually filtered out of the clay early on in the process. Keep trying. Thankfully, potters never resorted to such barbarism to color their work. At least, I hope not. Correct. Athenian potters worked with clay that was rich with iron, and that iron created a distinctive orange-red coloring. On to the next question. What were the chambers for firing pottery called? Correct. Pottery was fired in kilns, and the firing process was extremely precise and delicate in nature. You're almost done. Just one more question. The firing process was made up of how many stages?
Oh, computer. Trying to update.
No, it was much too complicated to be relegated to one stage. Try again. Correct. The 3 stages of the firing process were oxidation, reduction, and reoxidation. You know your pottery. Well done, Wanderer. Then what? On. No. Settling beds were where the clay was purified. Try a different answer. A frigatron is a special tool for roasting barley. Keep trying. No, that would be rather inelegant. Simply throwing clay into a fire. Try again.
Don't laugh at me.
You're on the firing process was not made up of 5 stages. Keep trying. No, that's too many steps. Even for something as complex as the firing process. Pick another answer. Correct. It would be my pleasure. Follow me.
This is our last tour then, isn't it? Illness, pirate attacks and shipwrecks all appear to have been valid reasons for arriving late to the Olympics. I was going to say that might not happen today, mightn't it? But you don't know, did you? This is the last one, isn't it? 8, 9, 4, 5, right, yeah. Learn how ancient Greeks made the dyes that coloured their clothes and accessories.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to Kythera, where clothes are dyed and noses are assaulted by disgusting smells. I think it smells terrible, and I can't wait to get out of here. The colors are pretty, though. This little island was where dyers brought all the color to Greek fashion through an intensely stinky procedure. This tour will reveal the steps it took for workers to brew the dye. Try not to step in any mollusk guts as you enjoy your visit. I promise I'll meet you at the end of your tour. See you soon, my friend.
Dyeing and fashion.
Fabric and clothing were colored using natural dyes from shellfish, insects, and plants. Skilled craftsmen across the Greek world extracted dyes from these sources and combined them with other substances to create a variety of colors. The dyeing process supposedly produced incredibly pungent...
No, hang on. I'm going to restart again. Sorry. Where are we? Kythera Islands. And there's only one here. I don't think I read the intro text, did I? Or did I? You've quit the tour. Learn how ancient Greeks made the dyes that coloured their clothes and accessories. No, I did read that.
Hello, my. I think. This right.
In Greece, fabric and clothing were colored using natural dyes from shellfish, insects, and plants. Skilled craftsmen across the Greek world extracted dyes from these sources and combined them with other substances to create a variety of colors. The dyeing process supposedly produced incredibly pungent smells, and ancient writers would often comment on the stink in their works.
The craft of leatherworking became very common in the classical period. While the Greeks had plenty of cattle to provide skins for leather, they preferred to import hides from trading centres like Thrace, Cyrene, and Sicily. Most tanneries operated on the outskirts of populated areas due to the strong smell. Tanning began with cleaning and softening the hides by soaking them in water, then pounding them to remove flesh and fat. Afterwards, the skins were soaked in water mixed with urine or covered with an alkaline lime to loosen the hair, which was then scraped off with a knife. Following this, they were softened in a vat of water mixed with animal dung, then beaten and kneaded. Finally, the hides were stretched on frames and immersed in a mixture of water and crushed tree bark, which made them softer, waterproof, and resistant to bacteria. Hellenistic Greece.
Murex is the generic name for 3 species of mollusks that reside in the Mediterranean. The substance they secrete was used by craftsmen to create the most expensive dyes in the ancient world, the most famous of which was Tyrian purple. Fishing techniques varied depending on the type of mollusk. In shallow waters, fishermen could simply dive and catch the mollusks, but they set traps if the water was too deep. Being carnivorous, murex were often lured using dead animal flesh as bait. It was imperative that the mollusks be captured alive, as they only secreted the precious purple liquid needed for dyes upon death. Murex,
Oh shit, wrong button. Sorry. The craft and trade of dyeing was believed to have originated in Crete before becoming widespread in classical Greece due to the need for marine mollusks. Most dyeing-related activities took place in coastal areas. During the classical period, there were large-scale dyeing workshops in Athens and Olynthios. The towns of Meliboea in Thessaly and Hermione in Argolis were also renowned for their dyes. The Greek writer Pausanias estimated that half the population of Bolis, a town in Phocis, dedicated themselves to fishing for purple-producing mollusks. He also raised the Laconian coast for having the best seashells for producing purple dye. The island of Cythera off the Laconian coast even became known as the Purple Island.
The purple liquid that made up most dyes came from a gland in the murex. To collect it, workers would either crack open the mollusk's shell with a knife, or if it was smaller, crush it with a stone. Each mollusk only produced a small amount of liquid, and thousands of them were needed to produce even a gram of the substance. Because of this, captured mollusks were usually kept alive in seawater immersed baskets until enough had accumulated to produce a satisfactory amount of dye.
Some archaeological sites have revealed the existence of small single household workshops filled with equipment for processing purple dye and dyeing fabrics. Other sites, meanwhile, have revealed multiple neighbouring houses that contain similar dyeing equipment, suggesting a community of dyers. Large-scale dyeing was carried out by highly skilled slaves and free workers, while the process was run by wealthy people. Members of these families were not involved in production. What was this one? Oh.
Because The mollusk glands were mixed with salt and left to decompose for 3 days. Afterwards, the resulting mash was placed in a vat, where it boiled until it was thickened and reduced to 1/16 of its original volume. The dyers stirred this mixture and removed any impurities. This process produced the foul odor so reviled by ancient writers.
What did he say?
The mollusk glands were mixed with salt and left to decompose. Afterwards, the resulting mash was placed in a vat, where it boiled until it was thickened and reduced to 1/16 of its original volume. The dyers stirred this mixture and removed any impurities. This process produced the foul...
Wow. Dyeing installations can be reimagined and reconstructed from archaeological evidence and testimonies from ancient writers. One of the key archaeological sites for understanding the ancient dyeing process is Raichi Hill, near the sanctuary of Isthmia. It features a complex installation of vats and tanks, as well as large water cistern and a well. Purple shells and loom weights were also found at the site, indicating that it was once a center for dyeing and weaving.
Dyers checked the hue of the purple liquid by dipping in raw wool. The hue could be changed by adjusting the temperature of the liquid and by soaking the wool for different periods of time, with longer soaking producing deeper shades. The wool was dyed once before spinning and again before weaving, to ensure it maintained its color. While Murex purple dyed wool easily, it did not adhere as well to other fabrics, such as linen.
I was imagining, what if you fell in one of those pots? Fucking hell. According to Phoenician legend, purple dye was discovered when the god Melqart and the nymph Tyros were walking along a beach with their dog. The dog bit into a large mollusk and its snout was stained purple. Impressed, Tyros asked for a dress dyed with the same colour. Purple garments were also mentioned in works like the Iliad and the Odyssey, usually worn by kings and heroes. For example, Helen of Troy weaved a large purple cloth depicting battle scenes between Trojans and Achaeans, and Penelope provided her husband Odysseus with a woolen purple cloak upon his departure. Greek poets of the classical period generally considered purple clothing to be the garments of heroes and gods. When was that? 1783. Modern period.
Most Greek garments were made from rectangular fabric that was rarely cut or sewn. They were normally folded around the body, with girdles, pins, and buttons. Dyeing served to give the garments a more unique style. Decorations were also widely used, and were either woven or painted on. They depicted things like animals, human figures, and mythological scenes.
While shellfish were used for the extraction of purple dye, other colours could be produced from other sources. Yellow was obtained from saffron, red could be extracted from madder plants or insects of the Kermes genus, and blue was obtained from woad plants. Shellfish dyes were brighter and richer than plant dyes, but they were also more costly. Cheaper shades of purple could be produced by mixing blue and red dyes in different quantities. What? Red figure.
Textile manufacturing and trade was one of the most lucrative businesses in classical Athens. Textiles were made of either wool or linen, with wool being the most common. Women produced the garments worn in domestic life, although some men ran professional workshops that fulfilled the same need. Other textiles were made by slaves and laborers under the supervision of master weavers, fullers, and dyers.
What did he say?
Textile manufacturing and trade was one of the most lucrative businesses in classical Athens. Textiles were made of either wool or linen, with wool being the most common. Women produced the garments worn in domestic life, although some men ran professional workshops that fulfilled the same need. Other textiles were made by slaves and laborers under the supervision of master weavers, fullers, and dyers.
An epinetron, also called an onos, was a tool used to turn wool into rovings. A few hundred ceramic epinetra have been discovered. They were produced in Athenian workshops during the classical period. Some scholars suggest that earlier versions of the tool could have been made of wool or leather. Epinetra were frequently associated with weddings and could be decorated with scenes depicting spinning, weaving, and or mythical weddings. A leg guard.
Clothes didn't just keep people warm. They were used as a way to communicate social identities, like gender, status, and ethnicity. These could be expressed through garments and accessories, but also jewelry, hairstyles, perfumes, and cosmetics. Wealthy Greeks usually had garments of the highest quality, and all their accessories were decorated with gold, silver, or gemstones. Parasols and fans were also an important part of elite fashion, and were usually carried by accompanying slaves.
During the classical period, Greek jewelry making became more sophisticated with the introduction of new techniques. Typical jewelry included earrings, pins, bracelets, armbands, finger rings, diadems, and other hair ornaments. At the end of the classical period, these items were occasionally inlaid with precious stones like emeralds, pearls, and amethysts. The clothing of wealthy women could also be sewn with jewels. Jewels were often engraved with vegetal animals, motifs, or depictions of gods and heroes. Like clothes, jewelry was a symbol of status and wealth that had often passed from generation to generation. However, jewelry could also function as an offering to the gods or as a funerary deposit. Buttons.
The wealthy
Last one.
The most common Greek garments were the peplos, the chiton, and the hymation. The peplos, typically worn by women, was a body-length cloth. It was folded back on itself and worn draped over the body and pinned over the shoulders. The chiton was a long garment with sleeves. Ankle-length chitones were normally worn by women, while men wore shorter versions of the garment. A hymation was a mantle that was worn over both the chiton and the peplos. Outside of daily life, there were also specialized clothes worn only in exceptional situations like weddings and religious ceremonies. The most common Greek garments were the peplos, the chiton, outside.
With the exception of slaves and young girls, many women in classical Greece wore some type of hairband. Adult women often had their hair tied in a ponytail or something similar, while young girls wore their hair more loosely. Most Greek men had their hair cut short. Beards and moustaches, meanwhile, were a matter of personal taste and fashion. Elite men preferred not to cover their heads, except occasionally with their mantle, veil, and when they wanted to avoid attention. Hats such as the pilos conical and the petassos wide-brimmed were used to protect their wearers against the sun or bad weather. They were typically worn by farmers, soldiers, and travelers.
to see you again, my friend. I bet your clothes feel heavier now that you know how many mollusks were killed to die then. But let's change the subject, yes? What else can I do for you? Then let's get right into it, starting with this question. Which purple dye was the most famous? I'm not familiar with that specific shade. Sounds like something the Spartans would like. Try another answer. Yes, the purple created from murex secretions was one of the most expensive and well-known dyes in the world. Here's another question. How did workers check the dye's hue? Correct! Workers dip wool into the mixture to gauge the exact hue of the dye. Almost done, my friend. Just one final question. Which body-length garment was typically worn by women? Correct! A peplos was a body-length cloth that a woman draped over her body and pinned around her shoulders. I had no idea you were so knowledgeable about fashion, but look at you. I should have known from what you're wearing. Then let's get right into which purple dye. No, although I think I'll use that name if I ever market my own dye. Marcos's marvelous mauve has a nice ring to it. I don't think so. Try again. Yes, the purple created here's... No, looking at the dye was not enough. Try again. It would not have been a good idea to stick a finger into a stinking boiling mixture of mollusk secretions. Keep trying. No, unless they wanted burned purple toes. Try another answer. No, unless they wanted burned purple toes. Try an... Correct. Almost done. Which body-length garment? Helop was the legendary founder of the Olympic Games. Keep trying. Achimation was a mantle worn over other types of clothing. Try again. The chlamys was a garment usually worn by men during hunting expeditions or military excursions. Try another answer. Correct. A peplos was a body-length cloth that a woman draped over her body and pinned around her shoulders. I had no idea.
Wait, hang on, let's do the quiz one more time.
Yeah, how? Correct. The chlamys was a garment usually worn by men during hunting expeditions or military excursions. Try another answer. Achimation was a mantle worn over other types of clothing. Try again. Correct. A peplos was a There is nothing I'd rather do. Follow me.
So it does, it just takes you to another one. It doesn't say that you've finished. Instead of homing pigeons.
Amazing. You have now completed all available guided tours. Congratulations on your achievement and dedication to knowledge. We hope you have enjoyed your explorations into the rich history of ancient Greece. Even though you've done all the tours, there's still plenty left to see. There are hundreds of world stations to explore, mountains to climb, seas to swim, and sunsets to watch. Remember that you're welcome to return to guided tours at any time and replay your favorite ones. On behalf of the Assassin's Creed team, thanks for playing the Discovery Tour, and we hope to see you again soon.
So we done it. Right, well that's a good point to end. There are still stations, swimming, fucking loads of stuff to do. You could spend your whole life, couldn't you? Traveling and looking at stuff. You see, this is a game in and of itself. The Discovery Tour. It's probably worth the price of the game, isn't it? Especially with all the discovery sites as well. Anyway, we'll end there. This was fun. That's probably the end of Assassin's Creed Odyssey as well, in total, if you know what I mean. We might be moving on to Batman Arkham Origins tomorrow, perhaps, if it works. If not, I'm not sure what we'll do. You might either move on to Arkham Knight, or I might choose a different game. I'm not sure, but we'll see tomorrow. Anyway, in the meantime, my name's Waldowski, and thank you to every single one of you who watched, and I may see you tomorrow. Cut. Cattle. Who was that? I can't remember the name. We should do the Darkness at some point as well. I said that before, didn't I? Anyway, good night.